Hey everyone, today on the PrimateCast, Dr. Julie Duboscq.
Evolution,
communication,
cognition,
conservation,
behavior.
primatology,
Typically primates.
Become the monkey.
Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us on the PrimateCast. This is podcast number 61, and the release date is Friday, January 7th, 2022. In today's podcast, I sit down in the studio with Dr. Julie Duboscq, currently a researcher at the French National Center for Scientific Research, or the CNRS, based in the Department of Ecoanthropology at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris. Julie's been a fixture in research on the evolution of sociality and social behavior in the macaque genus. She's a long-term member of the Macaca Nigra project, with those mischievous selfie-taking crested macaques on Sulawesi in Indonesia. But she also studied Japanese macaques over a 5-year period with me here in Japan when we recorded this interview. Julie spent a good deal of time thinking about and studying relationships between individuals, within the groups, and all the costs and benefits that those relationships entail. In the interview, we cover her time and research on Koshima Island in Japan, complete with various fieldwork fails that she experienced while running field experiments with the macaques. Julie shares some of her research linking social networks with the transmission, or not, as we'll come to see, of infectious agents. And we also get to talking about her transition later to a permanent position in France, which was her biggest news at the time, and she shares some tips and encouragement for others at that stage. We close the interview by touching upon the concept of open science and the philosophy around transparency and collaboration in research and publishing, something that I myself feel very strongly about. Now, this podcast was actually recorded a long time ago in June 2018, just as her second fellowship from the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science was ending, and she was heading off to her current gig. Since the podcast is a little out of date, I'll have to push her for an updated interview to see what she's done with the things she discussed here that were noted as being in progress. But Julie's someone I admired greatly. We share a fascination with the process of science, and we care a lot about the hows of the process, and not only the what-fors and the so-whats. So she's someone I feel I work really well with, and I think, or at least I hope that's reciprocated, but I hope that this aspect of our relationship also comes through in the interview. So I hope you enjoy my interview with Dr. Julie Duboscq. It's weird. I think this is going to be the weirdest podcast because I don't feel like there's anything left to uncover that we haven't already uncovered. And then it's hard not to feel like it's just totally artificial. But I did an interview with Mike, and that was weird too. But it worked out pretty well in the end, I think. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But I'm not sure if I can do it in any particular order. So I'm just going to start throwing things out at you.
Sure.
Well, no, that's not true. It will go in a particular order. So you first arrived here in 2013. Would have been around was it September?
October, yeah, middle of October.
There.
Yeah.
And you quickly were shipped off to Koshima.
Yeah, within a couple of days, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been around a little bit before that, so seeing kind of different field sites, and you'd been in primatology for quite some time and even managed field sites and things like that. But I don't know if you had any kind of expectations of what it was going to be like to come to Japan at that time and conduct field work here. There's still, I think, not that many people who've actually come and established themselves from outside of Japan as you kind of have and conducted field work for that long of a time. But yeah, what was the thought process before coming here, and what were your kind of expectations?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
I know it is.
No, I can tell you what I didn't expect, actually.
Yeah, okay, let's start with that.
So I didn't really expect that it would be kind of difficult and easy at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy because it's very well organized, it's well managed, there's a hard building as a field station. You don't have to worry about much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because in Koshima the conditions are very special. You need to get a boat to go to an island that is literally like 300 meters from the coast, which you have the feeling you can just walk or swim to. And then it looks easy observing the monkeys because they're provisioned, so they gather in one place, so you find them easily. But the island is a bit rugged, so it's when they are not on that beach where they are provisioned, then it's kind of difficult to follow and keep track of where the group goes and what they do. So yeah, I mean, and I had heard people saying that Koshima is really the hardest field site in Japan. It cannot be. I mean, but in a way, maybe.
But I always like. It was probably the same when we first went. But I always liked. So even though it does sound a bit ridiculous that you have to hire a boat, and it's not cheap. It's in Japan every day basically to go. But that moment when you're on the boat literally for like 30 seconds, and you come around the corner into this little bay. And then suddenly all the monkeys are calling, and it's one of the most exciting also things, right? So you went back a bunch of times, but I imagine that feeling still the first time when you re-greet the monkeys is special.
I was the same. Yeah, and I distinctly remember you as this very first time, where like, so now open your eyes and your ears. Oh wow! And it's a very special feeling.
Yeah, cool place. Yeah. Did you? So I mean, obviously, it is pretty well known in primatology as the birthplace of Japanese primatology. But did you have any? Was that kind of a thing before you arrived there, or was it really just kind of no?
No, it was
historical.
It was a thing. Yeah. And I also remember being impressed in a way by the sign here as well at PI, like this is Kyoto University Primate Research Institute. It's the birthplace of modern and Japanese primatology. And arriving in Koshima was also a kind of swimming with the giants or something. I don't know what could be the appropriate expression here.
Well, I think here we often hear from Professor Matsuzawa and others about the spiritual ancestors. So Kinji Manishi being the main ones, and then his students at the time. So I think they put a lot of effort into maintaining that culture and that storytelling aspect of it. So the prominence of the historical kind of significance of it is always it's always there, I think. Yeah,
and it's true that you come here with that in mind, and then you feel it too in a way. It's very true.
But the monkeys there didn't actually always treat you that well in terms of the project that we started. Yeah. So I remember one of my favorite moments. I mean, there's a couple of stories, but one of my favorite moments with you is when I think it was at the IPS Congress in Vietnam. You were presenting your talk, and it's like, okay, here's a Japanese macaque social network, and right next to it. And it looks obviously complex, and there's a lot of links between individuals, various centrality. And then the plot right next to it, and here is a transmission network with absolutely no lines between individuals. So what were we trying to do in that scenario?
So, you mean that as a general research question?
Yeah. So, I should give the background behind that.
Yeah. So,
result, the famous result.
So we were interested in the transmission of parasites within a network, a social network, and I had kind of designed pseudo-ectoparasites that I tried to stick on the monkey's hair. So there were different colors for different individuals.
If I don't stop you right there, the people listening are going to be like, what is she going off about? Pseudo-ectoparasites.
Little grains of rice covered in glue. It was supposed to mimic an item that they would catch when they get in contact with each other. like a real ectoparasite maybe. And I wanted to track the diffusion of those little sticky things across the network. But yeah, it was challenging first to set up on the monkeys that didn't really like it. And then it just didn't transfer.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a complex grooming network or contact network, and then no transmission event.
We also had a very complex way of creating those little sticky things. So I think we started with wood chips in the beginning. Trying to cut little pieces of wood off some boards, and then painting them all different colors, and then handball wax, I believe, was the
yes handball wax
adhesive.
True. And it was sticking as much on my fingers than it was sticking on the monkey's hair. So
and then you have a question of how to distribute them across the monkeys, so attaching them to little branches and trying to not that we would condone poking monkeys with sticks, but yeah, it was kind of an adventurous little study going on.
I tried different substrate as well. I remember trying a powder, a color powder as well, and but it was also quite challenging to put on the monkeys. And then it was also a fail because the individuals that were coming to groom that colored female didn't really like to see her hair colored. So they would like, oh, yeah, no, I'm not touching that. So, well, no transfer, no
but
transmission.
maybe that's partly a reaction that you would expect to see if it were some kind of a transmissible infection as well.
No, it's true. It's very true. Yeah.
But at the same time, you were also trying to track something else spreading through a network.
Yeah.
Along with the pseudo-ectoparasites.
Yeah. So the project was a more general project to look at transmission of information and of parasites and see whether there's a trade-offs in place to increase information transmission and prevent or decrease parasite transmission. And so at the time, the standard way of looking at information transmission was to use those artificial fruit, where it's a little box and there's some food inside, and then it can be opened maybe 2 or 3 ways. And so we set up that, we went into that paradigm as well. We designed really technical boxes where they had to push a button and then it would release the lock mechanism of the door, and then this door could be opened in 2 ways, and there was remote control. It was a technical,
it was incredible
achievement, I think. Yeah,
it was incredible. And before you get to the punchline of that, like when designing so you were designing this with engineers at Strasbourg University as well, and so like what kind of thought process was going in to allow you guys to construct these boxes when you were thinking about the monkeys using them?
So we wanted something not too simple and not too difficult either for them. And having a simple door with a simple opening, we thought it would be too easy. So we added, they have to press a button first, a 2-step process. But then macaques being macaques, you need pretty sturdy equipment so that they don't destroy everything. And then I wanted it to be remote controlled, because ultimately we wanted to do diffusion experiments where we would provide those boxes to the rest of the group, not only to the individuals that acquired a certain technique. And so I wanted to set up who could approach the box when I was training, but also releasing all the mechanism at once when it was time for diffusion experiment. So we had to rack our brains on how to do that with those boxes.
And so from one kind of, I harp on this, we'll come back to it later, but from one fieldwork fail to another, to drop it in there. What did when we're watching those macaques, it seems like they should not have any kind of issue solving this task, and then the research just carries on as we totally expected. But it didn't work out that way. No,
it didn't. The Koshima macaques struck again, so to speak. And so one individual I trained was quite fast at understanding the task, and she mastered it quite quickly. But the others, not at all. Mm-hmm. And I wanted several demonstrators. Mm-hmm. That was the key point. So the group would be able to watch several techniques. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the training took too long, I think, and I'm not even sure the individuals would have learned ultimately, even at extensive training. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't reach the stage of carrying diffusion experiments.
So what do you think was, because we know that, I mean, these kinds of experiments have been done, with other groups, wild groups as well, other species of monkeys. Yeah. So what do you think is the real limiting factor, or maybe that's something that was different about this particular apparatus maybe, or like what would we do better in the future?
I think maybe actually the task was ultimately too complex. Mm-hmm. The other experiments that other researchers did, they stuck to that simple opening, right, somehow. So we could go back to those simpler techniques. But other avenues are actually also playing with what other researchers then came to do in Koshima as well, with color, food, and color items, mm-hmm, or places to go and fetch food, different places at different times. Mm-hmm. Other kind of situations where the monkeys have to learn through observing, mm-hmm, another individual, mm-hmm, that has the knowledge. Mm-hmm. There would be some options in the future.
Okay. So one of the things I learned about you is incredible resilience in the field and ingenuity and almost never give up. But at some point we had to kind of give up this specific thing. But then something really interesting also came out of it based on the observations and thinking about networks and transmission. And so maybe you want to talk a little bit about nitpicking. Something that people accuse me of doing quite a lot, but
yeah, nitpicking. It was funny because actually I think you started collecting some data on, mm-hmm, that. So where the monkeys, when they groom, they're very laborious in their task, and they really look through the hair, mm-hmm, that they're grooming, and then at some point they find an item and they grab it and they eat it. Mm-hmm. And it's a very stereotypical gesture somehow. Mm-hmm. And I remember that you started somehow recording those behavior, maybe not so systematically. So I thought it was really interesting because yes, we were also talking about transmitting ecto or pseudo ectoparasites,
right? And
so I used to observe those gestures during grooming and to count them, actually count their frequency, mm-hmm, during grooming, and we knew also from previous research in the 80s from Japanese researchers that those nitpicking gestures were really picking nits.
Yes, exactly. Quite literally.
Quite literally. Yeah, louse eggs. So it was a way of estimating lice load of, mm-hmm, the monkeys. And so ultimately, yes, all our fancy experiments failed. But it gave us the chance to use that behavior and to actually look at network and transmission of lice or risk of being infested with lice.
Mm.
And that led to an actual paper. So
Yeah, right.
all in all, not too bad.
Yeah, it turned out to be quite good. And I think that one got some media coverage too. And some of it was quite good, but some of it was also quite dodgy in the sense. Wasn't there one about, I feel like it was something about about decisions for mating based on human removing lice for sex or something like that.
There was some bad coverage where obviously the research wasn't understood.
All part of the fun.
Yeah. But yeah.
And so you've managed to, putting the Koshima stuff aside, after that you've managed to stick around for quite a long time. So 5 years now, with a couple of Japanese government postdocs as well. And those projects were also kind of taking similar ideas that we'd been developing over the previous years on trying to track infection in social networks. And but this time you had a focus maybe on well, I should say it was also on Koshima. Here comes another fieldwork fail, spoiler alert. But ultimately ending up doing some work here at PRI. So maybe you could walk us through that one.
Yeah, so I guess until recently, I maybe didn't put everything together, but now in hindsight, maybe I managed to do that. It's when we looked before at the link between social network and transmission, we didn't really tackle transmission. We tackled a state of the individual, its parasite load, for example, with a state, its social state, its position in the network. So this is all very static and correlational as well. Mm-hmm. We can't really say this network position leads to this parasite load or the other way around. And so talking with you a bit more about all this link between network and transmission, I think we wanted to be able to disentangle that relationship a bit more in details. And we also, well, because research is collaborative, of course, so talking with other researchers and asking those questions with colleagues, we started thinking that exploiting the parasite or pathogen diversity as well as the host's diversity would get us closer to investigating the link between cause and consequence of behavior and infection. Mm-hmm. And so we elaborated a project on including viruses and bacteria, where there's enough genetic diversity to draw individual profiles, actually, so individuals can express different strains, and if we can track the somehow transmission of those different strains together with the social network, then we can maybe infer transmission events and who transmit what to whom more directly. Mm-hmm. And that's what we wanted to try and with the Koshima macaques as well. The Fieldwork fail that you mentioned, it was also a bit surprising to me because I had colleagues doing those experiments successfully, and so the virus we chose to study, the simian-forming virus, is transmitted by saliva, and so we needed to collect saliva, and there's good research now that use cotton ropes and apparatus containing cotton ropes to collect saliva non-invasively from wild monkeys, and it seemed to work pretty well. Mm-hmm. But in Koshima, not so much. Although I have to say, I mean, this was the first GSPS project, so it was only 1 year. Yeah. And so if I had been spending more time in the field trying stuff out, then maybe it would have panned out. Mm-hmm. But I was a bit time constrained too. Mm-hmm. And so because we also wanted to look at this study as a proof of concept, maybe to really see whether we can actually find this virus and find diversity in this virus and match it to social behavior, then doing experiments here with the social group in captivity at PI was ultimately the best solution for that project.
So what was that experience like? It was probably the first time that you got that involved with the captive animals, and specifically in the context of the annual veterinary, I don't want to say inspections, but health evaluations that they do, where they are knocking down monkeys en masse, basically. But so what was that transition like, going from Koshima to swabbing animals directly during these health checks?
Yeah, that was also, I mean, I have to say, we sometimes kind of idealize fieldwork. It is hard work, and we spend many hours following the monkeys. But being involved here in that procedure where, they put to sleep an entire group at once, then they collect biological samples, and then they release the monkeys in their enclosure all at once as well. It's a massive undertaking. It's really, it has to be really like down to the second of tasks people have to do. It's very well organized, and we could sample like 60 or 70 monkeys in 2 hours. It's amazing. So that was also interesting to see, and we got really good quality samples. So I think it's part of research, as
yeah. So I know that this project is still kind of ongoing, and there's not a whole lot to say about what are the kind of prospects with the data that you're able to collect and start to analyze.
Yeah. So from the saliva of the monkeys, we could extract the simian foamy virus. And so far it doesn't seem that there's a lot of diversity in different strains. Most of the individuals of one group that I analyzed, at least, they seem to show the same genetic sequences of that particular virus, but there is some diversity that is expressed. So I hope we can exploit that variation between individuals. I hope we can also try to see whether there's variation within individuals, so individuals carrying multiple strains. It's been shown in chimpanzees, donkey and macaques as well, I think. And if we can really characterize that diversity, then because I also collected behavioral observation of those same groups, we can match it to behavior and see whether we can infer transmission. And that's still ongoing. But
so what's kind of the end game, do you think, for you, for yourself, and then just maybe more generally about this kind of, this kind of research is picking up, and the diversity of organisms that are being investigated and techniques being used is progressing as well. And I assume, so we're going to keep working together on this, but then you might have some other things on the horizon as well. But so what do you think is the kind of, what we're working towards on that one in an ultimate sense? I mean, one of the other interesting things for me is that if that relationship or that proof of concept that you talked about is it holds, then it's also possible to infer the behavioral networks from the pathogen genetics, or from the viral parasite genetics, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is also quite interesting.
It is quite interesting, and that's one perspective that we had put in the grants. But I think it could be useful indeed to infer connectivity, not only between individuals, but maybe between populations as well of animals, without necessarily spending years in the field to habituate the groups and collect behavioral data.
Yeah, right.
So if we can infer connections between individuals or between populations through harvesting feces and analyzing pathogen genetics, then I think it's a big step as well for ecology and conservation. It could help some studies in ecology and conservation.
Yeah, okay, very cool. So, kind of stepping away from the kind of science you've been doing since you were here, now's the part where I get to congratulate you on the air for the new position coming up with the CNRS in Paris. But I also want to know a little bit more about this process, because we actually have a lot of French researchers, students that come through PRI, postdocs, and also visiting scientists. And it seems like for early career scientists coming out of France and maybe want to go back to France, there is a very specific holy grail, and that is finding a way into the CNRS. So what's the story here, and how did that work out for you so well?
Well, part of it is luck, I think.
No. We don't deal with luck here. It's a science.
No, seriously, I think I also was at the right place at the right time. But part of it is making connections with people. If not working directly with people, at least engaging with people and talking science with people. And so for me it was, although I was here and it was really Japanese grant, Japanese institution, Japanese researcher, I kept my connections with France, and I started being more involved a little bit in French research with French people. So going to the meeting of the Animal Behavior Society, for example, in France, and just talking to people.
You're even writing French language articles in the last couple of years as well.
Exactly, so book chapters, and recently a book for university students as well. I think that's one important part. But mostly it's also putting yourself out. I mean, the CNRS application process can be daunting, but it's allowed me actually to take a step back and reflect on what I really wanted to do as research, and putting together a research project that is supposed to be reflecting, so not only your immediate interests within the next 2 or 3 years, but probably what you want to do in the next 10 years is an interesting yet really difficult exercise. But those kind of really big applications for permanent positions allow you to do that, and that has been really, really helpful for me to put myself in that situation.
And then you'll be joining, so at the museum in Paris, you'll be joining our good friend who's often in Japan as well, Cecile Garcia.
Yes.
So that's going to be, double the pleasure for me when I come and visit Paris.
Having all your friends in the same place.
Yeah. Definitely makes it easier. Friends and good colleagues.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing I want to ask you about, because I think it's kind of important. I mentioned, so over these 5 years that we've been working together, which has been fantastic, not only have I learned a lot about your persistence and ingenuity, creativity, and hard work on these projects that you've been running, but also we've talked a lot about kind of science and in some ways philosophy of science. And you have a very specific philosophy about open science. And I think that's worth talking about. It's something maybe that not everyone it's not on everybody's radar, but it's something as simple as, how you approach review processes or engage in that kind of, I don't want to call it underground. It's very relevant and very in everyone's face in science, but maybe you just want to talk about where that came from. So specifically, I'll just start with the simple one, which is signing reviews.
Yeah. So it's been several years now that I systematically sign my reviews. And it's not because I want the credit for it. Yeah. It's because it's more transparent and it can start discussions, direct discussions as well between people. And where it came from, I think I was a bit taken aback when I started my PhD to see how much competition there was between scientists, and that some scientists were so cautious that they wouldn't even talk about their current research.
Right.
And that they wouldn't present a study at a conference if it wasn't published. And that was kind of scratching me against my my view of research. Maybe it was a naive view, but for me research is collaborative, and we can openly talk about what we are working on, what are our ideas, and we shouldn't be afraid of it, most of all. And so little by little, so it was a process as well, a gradual change. But I started signing my reviews and then trying to publish open access as well. Although it's not given to everybody, because now, although every journal might do open access, it's very expensive. So maybe the system needs to be improved here as well. And there are some new interesting journals that are actually supported by scientific societies or institutions where it allows to reduce fees for open access. But I think that's also very important, so that anybody can access research and be able to discuss it too. So that could mean pre-registering studies. It could mean opening post-publication reviews as well. And so, I think it's, even as early career researchers, even if we don't have a permanent position, we shouldn't be afraid of that. I think, people were also telling me that it's maybe putting early career scientists at risk for their career, especially because they're not settled, and so it might come back and bite them. But I think it's a mistake to think that way.
I guess you haven't had any experiences like that.
No, not at all.
And there you go at CNRS. So
now that I got a permanent position, then I'm gonna try to push.
So that's where I wanted to go next. Is what do you have anything in mind for the future for this, and how do you think CNRS also do they have any policies or anything that are progressive in this kind of sense? Or
so I think in general the European Union scientific policies are pushing for more transparency and more open access, and so they also then provide more funding for that. But I think it's even like changing the way people think and showing students, for example, that it's not because we don't publish in very high-ranking journals behind paywalls that we don't succeed. I think you and I are the perfect example. It's, we kind of, I don't know if we disregarded on purpose high-impact factor journals, but we have a decent record, although we never went for, high competition journals, and it works. So,
I mean, there's always an appropriate outlet, I think, that doesn't require you to necessarily sell your soul, or or then maybe that's just someone who's had some rejections.
And it's not about demeaning high impact journals.
Of course, yeah.
It's not at all that. It's just.
But it is right. It's a skewed sense of competition that you get when people believe that they need to do that in order to have success.
Exactly. So I want to work towards dismantling that urban myth.
Good. All right then. I'll be in your corner.
Good.
So thank you for 5 years.
Thank
good
you
science.
So much. Yeah, I think I was serious when I was saying that nothing would have been possible without you and your support.
She's talking about the PrimateCast, very clearly the PrimateCast.
No, Andrew specifically. Yeah.
Well, it has been a pleasure working with you, and will be to
is.
continue to.
Exactly.
Yeah. No was in that sentence.
You have been listening to the PrimateCast, a podcast series dedicated to all things primatology and wildlife research, to the conservation of species, and to the dissemination of scientific knowledge. The podcast is brought to you by the Center for International Collaboration and Advanced Studies in Primatology at the Kyoto University Primate Research Institute. Visit us online at theprimatecast.com and follow our social media feeds on Facebook and Twitter at the PrimateCast.